Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're talking about mental health in the workplace. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm, and Voyager U, a catalytic gateway for building your independent work life. Please hit the subscribe button below. That will allow us to deliver better content to you, as well as let you know when we're going live. Also, a reminder that you can catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform, whether it be Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and many others. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce today's guests. Welcome, Tara Jebens-Singh and Stephen Lutes of Northeast Youth and Family Services. Tara is CEO and president, and Stephen is a school-based and outpatient therapist. Their contact information is in the comments field if you're on the YouTube channel watching the video, otherwise in the show notes for the podcast. All right, let's start with you, Tara. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your organization, and the various things that you're involved with.
Sure. My name is Tara Jebens-Singh, and I have lived and worked in suburban Ramsey County for the last 30 years, raised my family here. I have been in education, public policy, older adult and human services in a number of different capacities. My current role is with Northeast Youth and Family Services. We are a community-based, trauma-informed, culturally responsive health and human services, mental health and human services, a nonprofit agency that has served suburban Ramsey County for the last 45 years. When I say community-based, what I mean is that we actually contract with 15 different municipalities to provide services regardless of individuals' or families' abilities to pay. We are also partnering with 3 different school districts with their school-based therapy, of which Stephen is part of, and 5 different police departments to help them with their our community advocate program, supporting mental health services in conjunction with law enforcement. So we have a number of different projects and initiatives that we support throughout the community. I also have the opportunity to work with some greater regional collaborations, including the Many Faces of White Bear Lake, the Partners for Good, a nonprofit initiative through Vadnasites Economic Development Corporation, the Consortium of Lake Area Senior Services, and very proud and germane to our conversation today, I sit on the board of directors for NAMI, Ramsey County's board of directors. So happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Tara, that is quite a mouthful on all that you do. Is that something that you've kind of evolved into or grown into, or have you been active in all these organizations for quite some time?
Well, I would say that it's evolved over time. So I come from, like I said, I come from a policy background. So I started working with the Legislative Auditor's Office, moved into some contract work while my children were small. And then my last official title was the Adult Programs Coordinator with White Bear Lake Area Schools, working with their Adult Enrichment, Adults with Disabilities, and their senior program. And housed within their senior program had a number of human services that allowed me to interact more broadly. And so, whether that's working with Metro Meals on Wheels or senior transportation or some of these other broader collaborations, that really is where the magic happens, is when you get the right people around the table talking about bigger things. And so, at Northeast Youth and Family Services, there isn't anything we could do without community support and in conjunction with our partners. And so I think it's just a way of approaching how do you tackle problems and to work together on solutions.
Great. Well, thank you very much again for joining us. Appreciate your time today. Stephen, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to where you're at today, and what you do with your time.
Yeah, so I'm Stephen Lutes. I am a school-based therapist with Northeast Youth and Family Services. I serve in 3 different Roseville area schools as a school-based therapist. And yeah, I actually started my career as a teacher and realized I loved the kids, but saw so many needs that they had before they could sit down in their desks and learn, and wanted to move more into the mental health aspect to prepare students. And then as I did that, I realized how much of what's available in mental health and what's possible is decided in policy circles. So I went back and I got both a master's in social work, which allows me to do the mental health therapy, but then I also got a joint master's in public policy from the Humphrey School at the University of Minnesota. And so really my work is right now is working with individuals, but also keeping an eye on how do we, bring nonprofit, private and government units together to create better systems, to create better possibilities for particularly my interest particularly is in youth, but just in general mental health across the board in Minnesota in particular. What do? I have 3 young children, 6, 2, and 5 months. So that's a large chunk of my time these days. It's been great because I'm a school-based therapist. I've been home with them all summer, which has been amazing. So yeah, that's a lot of where my time goes, is my three beautiful ones.
So where did you start with your teaching, and what did you teach? And did that shape kind of, I guess, your personal philosophy now and how you go about doing what you do?
Yeah, so I taught in Kansas City, Missouri. I was part of the Teach for America Corps in Kansas City for 2 years. I taught middle school English. That was a journey to get there. I was originally told I would be teaching early childhood education, and there were some funding cuts. And then so I moved to elementary and eventually ended up at 6th through 9th grade English. So I think it shaped the equity and just ensuring that all students, all children have everything they need. I was in a very low income neighborhood, and so just saw the disparities between some of the kids that I worked with and peers in different neighborhoods. So that definitely has shaped a large part of what I'm doing today. Yeah.
All right. So Stephen, let's start with you, dovetail into some of the things that you saw during your teaching days. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about some of the common mental health conditions that you see among your clients at the Northeast Youth and Family Services organization.
Sure. I work with children mostly right now. So I work in 2 elementary schools and a K-8 school. So really what gets a lot of kids to me is behavior issues that teachers and support staff are seeing. So kids who can't stay in class for various reasons. They're acting out, they just get up and walk out because they get overwhelmed. Definitely also some kids who are very quiet and and reclusive almost. And so those are kind of the concerns that people see. It's especially with kids, you start talking about diagnoses and it just gets tricky. But if you have to say what diagnoses are we seeing, there's depression, anxiety, a lot of trauma, ADHD, though, that's a whole other debate on yes, kids have it, but how much are we diagnosing and things like that. So that's what a lot of see. We also have in our clinic, we see adults, children, adolescents, youth, and adults. So definitely their depression, anxiety, trauma, things like that.
Okay. And then, and I think you touched on a little bit, again, what you saw as a teacher, but talk a little bit about whether or not the symptoms you believe are related to the conditions, and how do they show up either at home or also in the workplace?
Yeah. I think just like any medical condition people might have, symptoms vary so greatly from one person to another with the same symptom. We're seeing that with COVID. We have some people who walk around with completely, untouched, and yet other people have such severe and symptoms and die. So I think symptoms range when you have people with different things going on, and but I think really what it comes down to is people not functioning at what they're doing. And so whether that's, just anxiety that overwhelms you and makes it hard to even start on things because you're so concerned about finishing it perfectly that you can't even start. But I think it's also important, Rick, to keep in mind that, like, just as there are different medical conditions, there are different mental health conditions, and how those show up in someone's lifetime are going to be very different. There are some people who will have a lifelong mental illness and will struggle with something like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder for their entire lives. And I kind of analogous to that is like some people have diabetes and have to manage that their whole life. They're maybe taking insulin, they're seeing their doctor monthly, they're changing their lifestyle to be healthier so that is managed. And some people are going to have to do that with mental illness. But similarly, many of us don't have a lifelong kind of health condition like that, but we might throw out our back trying to do some yard work or playing basketball or something. And so, yeah, you're gonna have to change your life for a time period while you let that heal up and rest. People are gonna run into mental health struggles at times that are going on for a while and require going to see the doctor, or when you have it back, you go see the physical therapist. You might need to go see a mental health therapist when you're really struggling with something, whether that's the death of a family member or or just things pop up in our lives and we're unexplainably depressed for a time, and so so noticing those changes, I think really when you start thinking about symptoms, it's the big thing is changes. What's different than it was even a couple of weeks ago. And also just like sometimes the term mental health gets stigmatized. And so sometimes people, for most people who aren't experiencing mental health issues, I like to use the term mental wellness because there's just times you're not feeling well. So similar to someone who has allergies, right? In April, you might know, man, it's going to be rough for a couple days. I need to close my windows. I need to stay inside a little more. We're all going to run into those time periods where, oh man, something's just going on. I don't feel great. And often those can be taken care of by talking to your friends, being with people, being connected to people you love, meditating or praying or whatever, some spiritual thing you might have that lifts you up. So I think just understanding that there's no one size fits all for what mental health means, for what it looks like for a person. But there's varieties. It changes over your lifetime and it changes person to person.
I appreciate you sharing that. I think that will prove to be valuable to our listening audience. So thank you, Stephen, for shedding some light on those things and bringing some issues forward. Tara, let's jump over to you and we'll take the COVID pandemic. Stephen brought it up, but how has the pandemic affected these conditions and the overall mental health of people in our community, and what are you seeing?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that there have been some multiple pandemics that have been happening in the last couple of years. When you look at the issues around COVID, when you look at the dramatic ways that we had to adjust to keeping people safe. So there are big economic changes and shifts that happened. Of course, we had a number of issues happening locally with the death of George Floyd and the uprisings and community response to that. So there have been a number of pandemics and also the idea of the ongoing inequities and how each of these impacts different communities differently. And so I think all of that affects our mental health and well-being. I know that it has really a big conversation has been how has the isolation and not being engaged at school and work impacting individuals and families who initially, when we think of folks who are already living with ongoing mental illness challenges, whether that's depression or anxiety, chemical dependency, or other kinds of concerns, if they are isolated and away from their normative habits, their support groups, the ways that they can find respite, like Stephen had talked about, the idea of being able to be active in your faith community, to be in your sports team, to be able to shoot hoops with the guys on your lunch hour, if that adds, a sense of camaraderie and stress relief. When all of those access points are removed, everybody feels a heightened sense of not being able to keep their mental well-being in balance. I think that what we're also starting to see is a bit of fatigue, meaning that, I think everyone, I shouldn't say everybody, but I think there's a general community sense of we can do this, tell me what to do and I can do it. And then 6 months later, and then a year later, and now again with the resurgence, there's a sense of, I don't know how long I can keep this team spirit up. And I think that can be just a grind for individuals. And I think that that's something we're starting to see also within workplaces. When we look at the labor shortages, we haven't had time to take real vacations. There hasn't been true downtime. There's less separation between home life and work life when we work from home. So I think that we're all just starting to feel it pile up, and that's me as a layperson describing it. Maybe there are more technical ways of of having that, but I think that those are common experiences that we're hearing throughout the community.
All right, Stephen, how about you? What are your thoughts on how you think the pandemic have altered the overall mental health of our community?
Yeah, I think Tara hit on a lot of great things. I think one thing that I have noticed, and I've talked to colleagues and others in the mental health field, is just kind of the variation in what we've been seeing at different times. At the beginning of the pandemic, when we all knew this new disease was coming and we heard about it in Asia and then Europe, and slowly it's making its way here, we saw a rise in anxiety. The first time I actually ever heard of COVID was a client came in who had a 4-day panic attack because he heard about this new virus and truly could do nothing for 4 days. And it was just it was this new thing, and it just was overwhelming to him. And through working with him, we were able to, kind of talk about, okay, yep, it's coming. And it came as I was working with him. And then honestly, by about the end of May or June, he was like, I feel fine. It was the anxiety of, I don't know what's coming, that was so huge. And then, so I think that was the big feeling, the big kind of worry at the beginning, and that we saw a lot more anxiety. And then as we moved, as Tara said, we moved into the long periods of isolation. We saw a lot more depression as we kind of got, summer we could be outside. We got into winter in Minnesota. It is hard to be outside with people for a long period of time. And so we started to see more of a depression as people felt that isolation, weren't able to hug, be with in the same ways, family members at holidays and things. And then, we kind of have loosened restrictions, and now all of a sudden, there's a resurgence with Delta, and we're going back to school. And I feel like we're starting to see a rise in anxiety again. So I think just kind of watching the different waves of things that are going on has really been interesting. I mean, from a clinical practitioner perspective, I think it's interesting and helpful. But I think it also, when people hear that, it can also normalize what they're experiencing. Like, oh, I am feeling anxious much more than any back to school year with my kids I've ever felt, or whatnot. And there's just so many layers on it too. For, like Tara said, for some people it's the economic. I actually did some work with the White Bear Chamber of Commerce and did some presentations for some of their businesses, and just some of the anxiety that they're feeling. And when can we open? What do I do with these employees I have to lay off? That's really hard for me as a business owner to have to lay off employees. So all people are getting hit in different ways at different times. But there are so many common experiences. I think it's really important to remember that we are not in this alone, and you're not the only one feeling what you're feeling, and it's okay to feel what you're feeling. And let's connect with other people who might be feeling the same way.
So Stephen, talk a little bit about the benefits at home, as well as the workplace, to addressing mental health issues early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think early is a great word to say there, Rick. There's always benefit to to addressing it, but when you do it early, I like to think of I use this illustration a lot with my clients. Is mental illnesses a lot of times are just kind of feedback loops, right? There's cycles there, and you have your virtuous cycle and you have your vicious cycle. If you think about depression, you start to feel bad, so you don't want to do things. That's kind of like really one of the hallmarks is when we think of depression, we think of, oh, I just feel really sad, but really kind of what it plays out as is, I don't really want to go do anything. I want to lay on the couch and do nothing. Well, so then you start laying on the couch doing nothing. Well, then we all have we have this drive to be doing things. So then all of a sudden I realize, crap, I haven't done anything in 2 weeks. Now I feel even worse, and now I want to do even less. And so you get into that vicious cycle where if you can catch it early and you can reach out for help earlier, then you can get on the virtuous cycle of, okay, man, I'm not feeling it today, but so I can't do everything today, but I can get the dishes done, right? I can get the counter in the kitchen clean and I can feel better about that. Or, man, there's a lot of dirty laundry on the floor. Let's at least get it down into the laundry room. So at least I'm not stepping on this all day and I can feel a little better. And so it's just, it's those cycles. Is it virtuous? Is it the vicious cycles? And so the earlier you can kind of turn that tide and start on the virtuous cycle, the better.
Totally agree. Tara, how about you? Comments on addressing mental health issues early and benefits that folks might see in the workplace and or the home?
Well, sure. Well, when I think of making sure we have a supportive work environment at NYFS, it's recognizing that people are whole people, even when they come into your workspace. And so making sure that you give them permission to, just like if they twisted their ankle on the weekend, not to have a lighter, physical duties that day. If you know that they just had a loss in their family, it might not be the day you ask them to give their annual presentation. To have compassion that there needs to be room for the emotional burdens that people are carrying as they come through the door. So when I think about the early interactions, it's when you start to, first of all, if you've built connections with the folks that you work with, you'll know in these events that can be stressful, even a positive stress. A new child in the family, means there's going to be sleepless nights and some adjustments, some other things that are going on. So making sure, one, that you have that good connection so that you can support those life events. And then also just creating to tap in to say, if somebody's starting to be tardy or having some unknown reasons why they're being absent more, or if you're seeing that they're being short or a change in their mood, or if they're usually vivacious and talkative and interacting and all of a sudden they go very quiet, these are early signs that you might need to allow them to exercise ways of self-care around their mental health and encourage ways for them to do that. And the benefits of that for a workplace, one is just human to human. It's the right way to treat people and to support their self-care. But also it makes for more productive teams. It helps with employee retention. It helps make sure that you stay focused as an organization on the reason why you're there day to day without being distracted. And so all of these are reasons to be paying attention to these little signs and symptoms that we should be taking care of ourselves and each other.
Let's jump from that. Tara, thanks for introducing that. Stephen, over to you. How would a person determine if they needed mental health support? It's a challenging thing for one to self-diagnose or have awareness of, given the circumstances they might find themselves in at that point. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it is hard. I think it starts with having that sense of mental wellness, right? If you are more connected to yourself and know, hey, this is when I feel good and this is when I don't, you're going to start seeing some of those warning signs earlier. And so I think, then like I talked about earlier, it's not a one size fits all. Having a sad day doesn't mean you need to get yourself into, see a therapist the next day. It means, hey, I need to call up a friend and just say, hey, do you want to go golf? Do you want to go catch a beer, right? Do some of those things that we know help us feel a little better. And so starting there of like, okay, is that working? Oh man, I've been doing all my self-care things. I've been making sure I get out to the gym and exercise. I've been making sure I've, connecting with my, with my faith community, with my spirituality, whatever, those things that help us, those aren't working. That's one kind of track of how to see that might be time to bring someone else in. I think just from a safety perspective, anytime you are having thoughts of self-harm or harming someone or harming another, absolutely that is the time to seek help. Those thoughts are serious, and that is a time to seek help. I think that's kind of always the number one. If there's any thoughts of harming you or another, then you should seek help. And I also just think that thinking about it in some time frame, right? We, especially in the midst of this pandemic, when things aren't how we want them to be, how we're used to them being, giving yourself some grace to say, you know, it's all right if the last 2 nights I have laid on the couch and binge watched Netflix. That happens, right? Like we just need, maybe that's what I needed to take care of myself. Now, when that turns into, a week and a half, 2 weeks, like that is then that's problematic. When it starts interfering with your home and work life and taking care of the things that you're responsible for, that is absolutely a time that, okay, now we need to start doing something different. When it's past a week and a half, we're getting to that 2 week point, and things are continuing to be hard. That is also the time, kind of a time-based way to think about when do I need to seek some outside help.
Tara, how about you? What are your thoughts? And what would you like to share here on how does a person determine if they need some mental health support?
Sure. Well, I would say if there's any part of you that's asking, should I give somebody a call? The answer is probably yes. If nothing else, you'll have a conversation and they'll say, this is fine. You'll be, thanks for calling, but this seems like it. The worst case scenario is you'll have a comforting conversation that everything's going to be okay. So I guess that's the first thing. If you're thinking, maybe I should have this checked out. Yeah, you probably should. If nothing else, it'll answer that question for you. The other thing I would say is that, especially during this time of pandemic, when all of the different typical boundaries in our lives that would be a check on us, meaning if I wore sweatpants for 5 days in a row pre-pandemic, my friends might wonder what's going on. But now everybody's kind of doing it, right? So it's a little harder to know what is just this global universal experience and what personally isn't really probably good for us. So I would say also it's not a bad idea to learn how to touch base with your friends and family and have them do the same thing for you. So to create an environment where it's okay to ask, how are you doing? And when someone says fine, say, no, how are you really doing? And allow the space for the bigger answer. And also, many of us consult with each other's loved ones. We sit and we review the day, we problem solve, we cry, we laugh, we share the ups and downs of life. If there's ever a time when somebody who you do that with, you're realizing this isn't helping. In the end, it's not solving any of their problems. It's not helping them work through bad strategies that aren't working for their lives. It's not buoying them. We're not laughing at the end of the cry. It may be time for you to be able to tap that person on the shoulder and say, I think this is bigger than what we can work on together. And to suggest pulling in some additional resources. I also would say that, that's a journey that somebody has to decide for themselves. So if you are a loved one, you have a loved one in your life who you're watching this happen, you probably also may have your own feelings that affect your own mental health and well-being around being part of that situation. Just like if you were supporting somebody who had a chronic illness or had a recent death in the family, those are reasons why you yourself may want to explore having somebody walk you through your relationship to that pain. And so that's another reason to reach out as well.
Tara, let's stay with you, given you sit at the top of your respective organization. Talk a little bit about some of the techniques that employers and employees can use to support their own mental health during the workday.
Sure. Well, I think one of the things is we are a go, 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 achieve, efficiency, treadmill kind of society. And the inbox is never empty. And we reward people for, seeming to be the busiest person on the block. And I think that disrupting that kind of a mindset can be a first step to remind people that they are larger than their achievements, and to make sure that we're valuing how we're looking at the people who are in our organizations. And part of that, I hate to say it, but it's just to look at how are tasks organized within your organization? Do you have somebody who chronically is going to be overworked because the responsibilities that have been laid at their feet are disproportionate to the hours that they're supposed to be working on that task? Setting people up for success so that they are not always behind or rushed or flurried. I also think that there are some really basic things like making sure that you have compassionate personal time off or reasonable time off or mental health days built into the kinds of breaks that people can have and take to be able to make sure you have resources for your organization, along with the benefits of health insurance, to make sure they have an employee assistance program or mental health and counseling kinds of things that they can tap into, and not just having it sit in the employee orientation handbook the day they get there and get their badge and their key and all of that, and not just once a year as part of a benefits package kind of push in the fall, but an ongoing conversation to remind your employees that that this is an okay place to look for help, and that we have resources and that we encourage you to use them. I think the other part of this that's really important, and I struggle with this myself as well, because when you are leading an organization, you want to make sure to present internally and externally that you're on top of it, that you got everything locked down, you are ready to go, that whole never let them see you sweat kind of a thing. And sometimes that can model to your team that you expect them to be at the desk regardless of what's going on, with a smile on their face. And that is not a healthy way of promoting a balanced or compassionate workplace. And so sometimes it's just being human to be able to say to your staff, to say to your direct reports, to say to your leadership, personally, I'm going to be taking off these particular days. They are around an anniversary of a loved one's passing, and I just know I'm not going to be my best. I want you to know that that's what I'm doing, and I encourage you to be proactive in those kind of days for yourself too. Or to be able to say, I know that it's super busy, and this was for me this summer. I didn't feel as if I had a big block of vacation that I felt I could really step away from the office. And so I let the office know that I was going to take Friday afternoons off. Instead of being able to step away for a big 2-week vacation, I still wanted them to know that I was going to do some self-care, take time off to rejuvenate. So I think modeling from wherever you're at, that it's okay not to be okay, and then to provide ways that people can work through it.
Stephen, how about you? Techniques that employees and or employers can use to support their mental health throughout the workday?
Yeah, well, Tara, you took the words "it's okay to not be okay" right out of my mouth. It's at the very top of my, kind of my cheat sheet on my notes. So I think that is, especially, who you're trying to reach is leaders, and just setting that culture of, yep, we're human, and we're not always going to be okay. And that allows employees to go so far in allowing employees to do it. But, I think the other, from that's an organizational standpoint, but as a leader, you're also a human. So, so what can we, little things you can do to be well in a day. One thing I have really worked on is, for myself personally, is, when you take those couple minutes to look at your phone, what am I opening up? Am I opening up messages to text a friend back and make that little connection and buoy my spirits that way by saying, hey, like, how you doing? Or it's great to see you last week, or whatever. Or am I going into a news feed that I know is going to make me kind of ticked off because of all the crap that I'm seeing in it? Or, whether that's your Facebook feed where you start to feel inadequate. Like, how are we getting rid of some of those negative thought forming activities and putting in positive thought forming activities? I think that's just, it's such a little thing that I've been able to start practicing myself. And I've noticed the days that my couple minute break is to text a friend instead of look at the news, I actually get a lot more done that day because I'm feeling better. As we continue to work in this pandemic world where a lot of us are still working from home, is figuring out, what are my boundaries, right? I have 3 small children. So when I'm back at the office and in schools, but when I was working at home, I would walk downstairs to use the bathroom and I'd have, kids flock to me. Daddy, can you read me a story? It's like, whew, like there's no gap between work Stephen and dad Stephen. So by the end of my time working at home, I realized I needed 10 minutes to just sit upstairs, and I was done with work, but I just needed to sit upstairs for 10 minutes so I could decompress. What I used to get on my drive home where I could just decompress, I could settle myself and be ready to go be dad. That is a huge thing of just finding those boundaries, finding those small ways when working from home that you can find it. And one other thing, again, I kind of talked about it with texting, but is how are we connecting? When we're in offices, the person in the next cubicle, the person in the next office, you just walk by, you're both heating up your lunch, you're just chatting, and we don't have that as much anymore. Or, you know, you're in the break room and someone else walks in and you stand in the far corners, so you miss some of those things. So how are you connecting with your coworkers? It's kind of awkward to email someone or IM them and say, hey, do you want to have a chat Zoom in 10 minutes? Like, we don't do that. But we did used to connect, you know, to just run into each other and connect. So how are you setting up some of those places to connect? That's another place where leaders can really set a tone is, you know, and it's awkward to do it on Zoom, but the first 5-10 minutes of this meeting is just to kind of chat, right? We're not going to pop right into it because this is when we get to just see each other face to face, whatever that looks like for your organization, for your people, but finding those ways to connect, I think is really huge right now.
Well, Rick, I'd love to jump in here on something just to say that one of the things that we're really mindful of, and not to say that we figured it out, but at least we're paying attention to it, is knowing that after this long gap, there are businesses now that are welcoming back in employees, right? And there are folks who have been working in isolation for 18 months. And there's going to be some emotional awkwardness. There's going to be some social uneasiness of, are we shaking hands? Are we hugging? No, we're not. Are we waving? We used to be really chummy, but that was almost 2 years ago. So do we still have that vibe? We're all kind of just dancing around this, figuring out how do we be in groups and physically in the same spaces again. And one of the things I think that's really key is just to acknowledge to your team leaders, your managers, your program leaders, there are going to be some major face plants. People who normally were gracious and easy to get along with and who navigated social spaces are going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. We're going to have awkward meetings where it's going to take a little time. And just to say that out loud so that when it does happen, we all get to just kind of laugh it off rather than being all, what did that mean for our organization? Well, it means we're out of practice, and that's okay. We're going to get there.
Yeah, Stephen?
Well, I was just going to say, it just made me think of Tara started. Were you April, May you started, Tara, at NYFS? Mm-hmm. It was December before I actually saw half of Tara's face in person. We happened to be in the copy room at the same time. And I think in the, 16, 17 months you've been there, I think we've seen each other in person 2 or 3 times, where normally we would see each other a couple times a week probably. And it's just so different. And yeah, so when we see each other, it might not be perfect, but it's still, we're still seeing each other. And that's
yeah. I think my comment was, you're so tall. You only see this much of somebody.
That's funny. I would layer on top of what you two just said, Stephen, going back to you talking about the news. I cut the news out years ago, and it has helped my mental health. I know that. And then exercise, which became harder to do when everything was locked down. But I know that I do better when I'm exercising regularly, and it doesn't even have to be something significant. It might just be a walk around the block or a walk around the neighborhood. And it might just be 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a 1 hour thing. Anyhow, those two came to mind as you two were talking. And then the last one about the getting to know or connect with everybody. A number of the Brumacombe Capital Portfolio companies use EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and the start of every weekly 90-minute meeting is a 5-minute segue section where everybody gets to talk about good news, both personally and professionally. And so that kind of water cooler time that everybody was used to getting in a way to connect with their coworkers and to feel more comfortable and connected, not just with the coworkers, but the organization as a whole, really has been challenging. And so EO is a way that the Brumacombe Capital Portfolio companies have been able to transition through that and still kind of hold the camaraderie together. So those are a few of the things that we've done. Stephen, talk a little bit about what types of mental health resources are available, not only in the workplace, but in the community at large.
Yeah, I think from starting at the workplace, EAPs are a great benefit that many companies offer, but are extremely underutilized. It's interesting. My wife's actually in human resources, so I hear about them once in a while. And last night when I was thinking about this, I asked her, like,
Stephen?
what? Yeah.
You have to jump in. You better tell everybody what EAP is.
That's a good point. Sorry. Yep, that's my lingo. That's my jargon. EAP is Employee Assistance Program, and so so this is straight from my wife's mouth, who's in HR. She was explaining that often companies that, if you're looking to add one for your company, often they come through your health insurance provider or a life insurance provider. They're usually just a couple dollars a month to add on each employee, and it provides services like 3 free mental health sessions with someone, or help with building a will, help with financial counseling, different things, so many different things that they provide. And that's a big thing that we've seen in the last year, is the number of people reaching out to the EAPs has grown incredibly much. My wife said at one point when she was really working on it, about 4% usage rate of a benefit. Like when a company offers health insurance, they expect pretty much everyone who's on that health insurance plan to use it, but an EAP is used at a 4% rate. So that is really low. And so it's extremely underutilized for employees. But it's huge because it can just offer 3 free sessions. Like, hey, kind of someone who's got who pulled their back with mental health. Man, this is really hard right now. I'm, my dad's in a different state and I can't go see him, and he's sick. Help me walk through this. And so I think that's a huge thing at an organizational level. In terms of what's available in the community, Minnesota, though we are probably ahead of most of the country, we're still, there's still a lack, and we're still always pushing to grow and expand services. But what the kind of the biggest push is, and we have, we were so glad more people are getting mental health help at NYFS, but a lot of primary care clinics now offer a therapist on site. So when you go, so it's at your primary care clinic, you can, someplace you're used to going. That's great. And I know many people who do it. They're my colleagues. And so, yep, they're really good. But we also have a lot of standalone mental health clinics, such as NYFS, where you can call, and that's what we specialize in, So for some people, it is better to have it where they're already going for care. And for some people, they prefer to do it elsewhere. But we do have a lot of great organizations. Obviously, NYFS is one. And through the pandemic, telehealth has grown and expanded. So I've seen people from Duluth down to, I think I had one person I saw in Rochester area, and so I've seen people from all over the state during this pandemic. And so, people, you mostly now we have to be within state, but who you can see has greatly expanded. And so that's been a really great benefit of this time where we all had to go online.
Tara, how about you? Talk a little bit about the mental health resources that are available to people, not only in our place, but in the community at large.
Sure. Well, along with just talking about NYFS as an agency, I will just say, when Stephen was talking about the EAPs and you're wondering, well, if I get 3 free sessions, what kind of a person am I talking to? It's organizations like ours. So you're actually talking to certified mental health professionals who are engaging in that work. So it is a solid place to get started. So I do reiterate that. The other thing I would say is, so I'm involved with the National Alliance of Mental Illness here in Minnesota, specifically in Ramsey County. They have a very active website that has a number of community education resources. And so I think that that's a wonderful way to tap in. And I also would say, when you go to trusted mental health sites, you're going to have a whole wealth of information that you can look up whenever it's most convenient for you. We have been trying to increase our resource library, our webinars, our educational series that are available, because we know the time when you actually ask yourself those kind of questions is probably at 3 a.m. when you can't get to sleep and the house is quiet and you finally have the courage to type on your screen, you know, the questions that you want to ask. And so, you know, one of the good things is that all of that now is available. So take advantage of the information that's there. And most importantly, write down the phone numbers of the organizations that then you can actually seek out true connection for your own life in the light of day. And so that would be something I would say as well.
And then, Tara, I know you touched on the organization on the front end of our discussion today, but just tell everybody a little bit more about the NYFS and how they can learn more.
Sure. So Northeast Youth and Family Services, I talked that we have a number of different services. In our mental health side, we have 2 outpatient clinics, one in White Bear Lake and one in Shoreview, and those are all age clinics. We also are very proud of the fact that we have art therapy, which is a wonderful modality when people aren't really in a place to just use their words to express their feelings. It's also great for younger children. Then we have our school-based program, which we talked about. The school-based mental health therapists are embedded within school communities, and this reduces any number of barriers to children being able to access care in real time. We also have intensive day treatment for middle and high school youth, and that is in our Shoreview offices. Now, one of the things the pandemic has really disrupted is the referral systems that would tap children and adults with mental health and well-being issues early enough to get them in the right spot in their care. So we are seeing higher acute needs within all of our mental health systems, folks coming in, you know, maybe later than they would have if everybody was seeing everybody and going, so it's that 5th day of sweatpants, huh? Remember I mentioned that before? We don't have enough of people tapping us on the shoulder. So people who are coming in later and later. In our human services department, we have a senior chore program that helps older adults stay and live independently in their homes. We have our youth diversion program that helps kids who are first offenders redirect. And then we have our community advocate program, which I mentioned, which basically partners with police departments who refer individuals to us who would be better served by chemical dependency or mental health programs than another interaction with law enforcement. So those are all of the programs we have. We encourage folks to check us out on our website. It's just www.nyfs.org. And we have had a number of different videos and educational resources that we have up on the website. So we encourage people to check that out. And of course, you know, like we talked about before, those are just the initial exploratory phases. We do encourage you to give us a call. We can connect you with the right appropriate level of first interaction and make that connection so that you don't have to walk this journey alone.
All right. Well, thank you very much for giving people a little bit more background there. Wonderful organization. And if anybody would like to learn more or contribute or participate in some way, please reach out to Tara. All right, so shifting gears just a little bit, I always like to dive into folks kind of their own personal business journey, things that they've taken out of what they've learned along the way. Everybody has some unique perspectives and experiences, and here's an opportunity for our Clubby audience to learn from yours. Talk a little bit about an important lesson that you learned over career that you wish you would have learned sooner. Tara, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think the idea of just acknowledging that no one person can know everything about everything. And so just to humbly acknowledge that the broader in scope that your responsibilities are, the more people you're going to have to bring in as experts to inform you in your decision making and the work that you're doing. And so for me, I would say my biggest tool is what I like to call my VIP Rolodex, if that's dating me at all, but it basically just says, you know, who do I know who knows more about this than I do? Who do I know who knows the right person who might be able to fill me in on this particular aspect? And what I mean by that, you know, I don't know how other folks who are in an executive director role is, but my day can start with making sure that the HVAC system can handle the hottest day in August and end with, you know, a complex federal grant application that involves our accountants and everything in between. And there's no way that any one person knows that. So for me, it's making sure I have note of who's that employee lawyer that I can call to ask this very specific policy handbook, change and get their opinion, or who do I know who used to work grounds crew to ask, do we need to change the grading so our basement doesn't flood next time it rains? I mean, anything and everything, the idea of making sure you've got really broad social connections. And the way to really make that work, I think, is to make sure you have something to offer back to people. So you've put into the collective pool so that when you make that call, you've added to them so that they're happy to help you out.
All right, how about you, Stephen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think exactly how to say this, but if you don't waste time, there's no wasted time. I've done a wide variety of things in my career, and at times I felt like, why am I doing this? Or I look back and at points and went, well, why, that was silly. I could have jumped into this earlier and been farther ahead. But I've realized, no, each place I've stopped, each random job I've taken, the research position that I took here and the volunteer research I did there, and the year I spent as a grunt worker making $9 an hour in this program, it have actually completely set me up to where I am today. And personally, I've worked to not waste any of that time. And so none of it has been wasted. And, as a 24-year-old, it was hard for me to recognize that I might not be in a straight line, but that line's still going to get me to where I'm headed. And as I've grown and learned, I've realized, yeah, that those byways were what made me who I am today. So it's been a learning, and I'm sure I'll learn even more as I go.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. Let's stay with you, Stephen. In terms of wrapping up today, if you wanted to either reinforce or maybe put something on the table we haven't covered yet, what's one key takeaway that you'd like the audience to remember regarding our conversation today?
Yeah, I think it starts and ends with, it's okay to not be okay. We are all going to, at some point in our lives, have hard situations, and we are collectively going through an extremely hard situation right now, and it's okay to not be okay, but not to stay there, right? It's also not, we also don't want to be not okay for a long time. So reaching out, seeking that help, but also recognizing that your help doesn't have to be super intense. It might just be your employee assistance program, 3 sessions to talk through something that's going on. It might be a longer term relationship with a therapist, but it's okay to not be okay and reach out for help, because that can make it more okay.
Great, thank you. Super synopsis. Tara, how about you?
I guess for me, I think when I look at who might be listening to the podcast today, just a request to the greater community, which is in your own personal and professional places of influence, to start making it okay to normalize discussions around mental health and well-being. One of the most impactful conversations was when I saw my husband, who's in corporate America, talking to a very influential person that we were talking about, and they both were sharing personal support kinds of conversations. It demonstrated that it's okay and normal to talk about and check in about mental health and well-being. And so for me, whether that means modeling that as a leader to demonstrate that you are human and are taking care of yourself, to creating space for your employees to do that, to making it okay for your family. Many of the people who are business owners and business leaders are high achievers. Make sure you're creating space for your loved ones who may not be reaching for the golden ring, that it's okay for them to celebrate who it is that they are. There are different ways of being. So just normalizing the conversation and then tapping in however you can. So if you recognize that you need help, if you know somebody else who needs help, or if you just want to make sure that there are always organizations that will be there for you and your loved ones, making sure that you do find a way to volunteer or sponsor or donate so that everybody has access to quality mental health services.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much for joining our clubby community today. Appreciate that very, very much. Good info, stuff that will be of value to our community as well as the organizations that they all work with. Just a reminder for people how they might get a hold of you. Tara, if somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they best connect?
So I would say to reach out to our website that'll have all of our up-to-date contact information. And so an email or a phone call or reaching out that way is really the best way to go.
Okay, and again, that's nyfs.org. Again, www.nyfs.org. All right, so Stephen, Tara, thank you very much. An enlightening and informative session today. Very valuable, so thank you and look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you.